Let me ask you something. What if I told you that pretty much our entire modern understanding of what motivates us at work, I'm talking everything from team building to why a good boss is so important, what if I told you it all started by accident, in a factory, almost 100 years ago? It's a fascinating story that gets to a fundamental truth about what makes all of us tick. And it really all boils down to this one question. This idea, it completely turned a century of management theory on its head and set the stage for a totally new way of looking at human behavior at work. So, to really appreciate just how revolutionary this was, we gotta kind of jump in a time machine. We need to see the world through the eyes of a manager back in the early 20th century. Back then, the big idea was something called scientific management. It basically saw workers as interchangeable parts in a huge industrial machine. The logic was really simple. You pay people more, they produce more. End of story. But a new, more human-focused idea was starting to bubble up, this radical notion that workers were actually social creatures, not just economic ones. And this massive shift in thinking, it didn't come out of a textbook. It all started with a series of experiments, which are now famous, at this absolutely massive factory in Chicago. So picture this. Between 1924 and 1932, researchers from some of the country's top universities show up at the giant Hawthorn Works factory. Their goals seemed pretty simple. Figure out how physical things, like lighting, affected how much people got done. What they actually found, though, had almost nothing to do with light bulbs and everything to do with the human mind. These experiments happened over 4 main stages. And with each one, that old worker as a machine theory just got taken apart, piece by piece, revealing a much richer, way more complex picture of what actually drives us. So the very first experiment kicked off with a simple, logical question. The researchers assumed, hey, if we make the lighting better, people will obviously work better and more efficiently. Makes sense, right? And at first, yeah, the results were exactly what they expected. Better lighting, higher productivity. But then the researchers got curious. They started dimming the lights, and productivity went up again. They dimmed them all the way down to about the level of moonlight. And incredibly, productivity still increased. This made no sense at all, and it was the first big clue that the real experiment wasn't about the lights. Totally puzzled, the researchers went on to the next phase. They picked a small group of women for an intense 5-year study. They changed everything: rest breaks, work hours, they even gave them free meals. The result was staggering. Productivity jumped by 30%. But here's the craziest part. It stayed that high even after they took all the perks away and put the conditions back to normal. The lead researcher, a guy named Elton Mayo, finally put the pieces together. The women weren't responding to the physical stuff. They were responding to the attention. For the first time, they felt special. They had become a tight-knit team. Their supervisor wasn't just a boss. He was someone who actually listened. They weren't just cogs in a machine anymore. They were collaborators. And the final study really hammered this point home. Researchers offered a group of male workers more money for more output, the classic scientific management trick. But the men didn't work faster. Instead, the group made up its own informal rule about how much work to do, and they'd pressure anyone who tried to do more. Fitting in with the team was more important than the extra money. And this led to the huge discovery we now call the Hawthorn effect. It's the simple but really profound idea that just the act of observing people changes their behavior. It proved that feeling seen, feeling valued, and feeling like you're part of something is a way more powerful motivator than a paycheck or a brighter light bulb. So, the Hawthorn studies cracked open the door to understanding what makes us tick. And then decades later, a psychologist named Frederick Hertzberg came along and just blew that door wide open, creating a practical framework that managers could actually use. Hertzberg's main idea was so simple, it was brilliant. He said that the opposite of job satisfaction isn't job dissatisfaction. He argued they're 2 completely separate scales, and they're driven by totally different things. He called this his 2-factor theory. So on one side, you have hygiene factors. Getting these right doesn't make people happy or motivated. It just keeps them from being unhappy. And on the other side, you have motivators. These are the things that actually create satisfaction and drive. Think of hygiene factors like basic plumbing in a house. You need things like a fair salary, safe working conditions, and company policies that make sense. If you don't have them, you're going to be miserable. But just having them doesn't make you thrilled to be there. It just brings you to a neutral, not unhappy baseline. Motivators, on the other hand, are what actually light a fire under us. They're the things that create real satisfaction and push us to do our best. And they're built into the work itself. That feeling of achievement after a tough project, being recognized for your contribution, having real responsibility, and getting chances to grow. So, what does all this mean for the workplace right now? Well, it gives us a really powerful and practical strategy for any modern leader. It's a clear, two-step playbook for building a motivated team. Step 1, you have to get rid of the negatives. You got to fix the unfair pay, the bad supervision, the frustrating policies, but that's just the starting line. Step 2, you have to actively build the positives. This means creating chances for achievement, offering genuine recognition, and trusting people with real responsibility. And this isn't just history, it's really the DNA of modern management. The sympathetic supervisor from the Hawthorn studies, that's evolved into the modern mentor or coach. The need to be heard is why companies have employee feedback surveys and town halls. And Hertzberg's motivators are exactly why the best companies celebrate wins publicly and give their teams the freedom to solve problems their own way. So the next time you think about your own job, ask yourself this question. Is your workplace just focused on preventing you from being unhappy? Or is it actually designed to make you feel motivated? The lesson from that factory almost 100 years ago is that while a paycheck might rent a person's time, it's that sense of purpose and recognition that will always win their heart and mind.